Thank you for tuning in to The Truth Talks. I'm joined today by Sandra Carpenter, and we're going to be discussing problems and solutions in the foster care system. Sandra, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
So you are the co-founder and executive director of Angel Reach. Can you tell us a little bit more about what Angel Reach does?
Yes, Angel Reach was created in 2008 to help foster parents with their needs of material items, clothing, beds, cribs, that kind of thing, for their foster children. And it evolved after that to helping kinship families because Montgomery County was the pilot program for kinship care in Texas, which basically means that rather than children being placed with stranger foster families, that the state was going to make a dedicated effort to find people they knew and people that they might be related to and have them stay with them while the case was going on. Okay. It was sort of a disaster right off the bat because the kinship families were not prepared to deal with the needs of the children that had been abused and neglected. They were not able to provide a lot of their needs as far as clothing and beds and that kind of thing. And so Angel Reach sort of stepped into the gap, and we became advocates for kinship families because we do believe that it is the best solution for children that need to be placed temporarily out of their family. We have done that until 2011, when we identified another population of children that needed some assistance, and those were youth that were aging out of foster care.
Right. So at the point that I guess 18 years old, right, they are released from the foster care system. What usually happens to these youth when they age out of the foster care system?
Well, it's kind of a gamut of things that may happen. Some of the youth are dropped off at gas stations or at the homes of the parents they were originally removed from, or homeless shelters. And the youth then find their way to possibly reconnecting with birth family members or calling friends to stay on their couch or going from shelter to shelter. And a lot of times they find themselves on the street or in jail or involved in human trafficking. Wow.
Is there any kind of, program or assistance provided by the state for these foster youth when they age out?
Well, there is extended foster care that the youth can sign saying that they would like to stay in foster care longer than 18. But most of the time, these youth have been waiting for their 18th birthday to be emancipated from a system that, has not been very kind to them. And so it's very rare that they do sign extended foster care. And up until recently, there wasn't a lot of places that did extended foster care. So even though if they wanted to stay in care, there wasn't a lot of places that they could stay. There are some other programs, kind of like trial independence, where a youth can leave the foster care system and then in 6 months can come back into the foster care system. Theoretically. In theory, that program exists. But a lot of times when a youth does want to return to the system because they realize they can't make it on their own, there's no placement for them. Or they've committed a small crime that prohibits them from coming back into the foster care system.
Wow. So you mentioned that, many of these youths are waiting for their 18th birthday. They're waiting to age out. Can you talk a little bit about what these youth are experiencing in the foster care system that would make them, anxious to want to age out of the program?
Well, they're experiencing multiple moves. They're experiencing living with people who are not necessarily nurturing or compassionate. And what we're talking about, the clients that I work with, we're not talking about youth that are growing up in family foster homes. We're talking about youth that are growing up in RTCs and business models of caring for youth, which are, multiple children, youth in one location, up to 40.
Wow.
And paid staff that take care of them, that are not connected to them in a relationship way. They're not a family care. Mm-hmm. It's an institutionalized care.
So you think the lack of the family unit and what it sounds like is maybe just the lack of compassion, understandably for any child, for any person, could imagine that being in an environment that's not compassionate, well, of course you would want to be out of that.
Yes, and the youth and children become very adept at learning what behaviors they need to exhibit in order to get moved to another place that maybe might be better or might be worse. It just, most of the youth that I work with have had, 14 to 21 places that they've lived in, which is not conducive for anybody's development, emotional, spiritual, or anything. So it's. I used to think that it was isolated incidents, but since we've been working with aged out foster youth for the last 3 years, and we've had hundreds of contacts, it is a theme of their stories, not an isolated incident.
Right. And I'm actually going to be doing some interviews with different youth who have aged out and who are in the Angel Reach program, so we'll actually get to hear their stories too. What do you think is the biggest problem with the foster care system? And you talked about the lack of compassion and lack of families, but as these, children are aging out of the program, what do you think is the biggest challenge that's presented to them?
I think the biggest issue is that the foster care system was set up to be a temporary system, and now we have children who are growing up in it. Mm-hmm. And it's not set up for that. Children are not built to be raised in a system. They're built to be raised in a family with relationships and be connected to at least one person in the world. Mm-hmm. And the foster care system is not conducive to that. It is about moving. It is about money. It is about levels of care. It is about change. It's a constant change. And so when you have a child that grows up with constant change is their constant, then it's hard for them to have a stable life after that. Right.
So in some of the previous interviews I've done, it's been mentioned that there's a perhaps over-reliance on psychiatric medications used in the foster care system, basically trying to control the behavior of these kids who, as you're pointing out, are in a really difficult and kind of painful situation. Is that something that you've noticed? Is there...
Yes, definitely. I mean, the 90% of the youth that have come into our program have been on medication previously. 10% remain on it. I mean, so that's a huge disparity to me. There are some youth that do need to have medication in order for them to be stable and successful and go to school and hold a job and that kind of thing, but not the amount of youth that have reported being on medication in foster care.
Right. And then so at age 18, when they age out, what is the situation? I mean, if they've been on, many of these medications are strong, they're very addictive. Are they just immediately, cold turkeyed off of them? Are they allowed to taper or?
They take what they have, and then when they run out, they don't know how to refill or see a doctor or make an appointment or keep their Medicaid going or see if they still have Medicaid. And so, yes, you do have a lot of the withdrawal behaviors and you have a lot of, freaking out, basically.
Yeah.
Or what is very common is that they will just start medicating with street drugs.
Right.
And then we have criminal activity, and then we have jail, and it just, quickly goes down the tubes.
Right. Yeah, I think it's estimated that something like 2% of foster youth go on to graduate college. Would you think that that's maybe a factor in, why that statistic is so low?
There is many reasons why college is not completed by the youth. One is that it's very difficult to figure out housing, stable housing, affordable housing, transportation, and it's just incredibly hard to go to school without any support. There's a lot of situations that go on, and even if they were living on campus, that they're not prepared to deal with, and they don't have anybody to talk to about it. There's nobody. I mean, when you and I went to school, we had somebody to call home to. We had somewhere to go for Christmas. We had someone to say, "What do I do about this situation? I've never experienced this before." That's not what they have. The other thing is that they really have trouble believing that they're capable of doing this. There is a lot of stereotypical comments made in high schools and in foster care placements, and that sort of take away the youth's self-esteem.
Right.
And so they believe the bad press about them.
Right. So I guess maybe this is where Angel Reach comes in. Can you maybe talk a little bit more about the services y'all provide and how y'all seek to, provide some solutions to those problems you just outlined?
Well, for the youth that are aging out of foster care, they can come to our program either as a day client or a house client. The day clients can receive the same services as the house client, except for housing, obviously. The house clients have probably more rules to follow than the day clients do. And we do it in sort of sections. The first part of our program, we have them come in for 30 to 60 days into our assessment center. And that's basically to see if they're ready for a program or whether they just need a place to crash. Because we have, limited resources, we need to be very careful that we're working with kids that are motivated to change and to improve their life. And so we actually, that part of the program has a big revolving door. There's, kids that opt out, there's kids that we discharge because they're not ready. But what's very cool is that 40% of those kids reapply and come back a second and third time, and they do much better. So at that point, we kind of make goals, life plan with them. Say, hey, what do you want to accomplish? Where are you? Do you have documents? Do you have your birth certificate? Do you have a social security card? Because most of the time they've moved so many times after leaving foster care that they've left everything and they've lost everything. They don't have an identity. They can't get an ID. They can't get a job without those things.
Right.
So, or have you finished your high school education, or do you need a GED, or do you want to enroll in college? Or, do you have any job skills? Have you ever worked before? Kind of doing individual plans. And during the first, 30 to 60 days, we work on that plan together. They have to be motivated to get up and get on with it. We can transport them. We get them to doctor's appointments, whatever they need to do, job interviews, school. But they have to be driving the bus on that.
Right.
Because what we're trying to tell them is, this is your life. You haven't been in charge of it this whole time. Everybody else has been telling you what to do. But it is your life, and you're going to have to take charge of it. So we're not only getting the physical things done, we do driver's ed also, but we're also working on the empowering. This is, kind of giving them the idea that they have the say-so. So they make mistakes sometimes, but it's okay because it's in a sort of a supportive environment. But as far as the sort of destructive behaviors that they've kind of gotten into, we kind of try to keep that to a minimum and discharge if it continues, because we are very interested in them learning early rather than later and not being sent somewhere for a life sentence or, 20 years in jail. We would like them to get consequences very quickly. So it's sort of tough love,
Right.
Anyway, if they complete that part of the program, then when they move out to our independent living, we have several houses and apartments that we put youth in. They can stay there for up to 18 months and pay minimal rent. They pay at the most $200 a month. And then they can save the rest so that they can move on to independence. That we have a car program. And then the most important part of our program is our mentor, because that's what we believe makes all the difference, is that they get connected with a caring adult, and that person is pretty much with them. Right. Our goal is that that's their connection, and that keeps them going. And even if youth are discharged from our program, we encourage our mentors to stay with the youth and stay in contact with them, and that sometimes is what helps bring them back the second time.
Right.
But without that, it doesn't matter whether they go to school or get a driver's license or get a job. If they don't have a relationship with somebody, then it's not going to work in the long run.
Very interesting. So, Sandra, can you talk a little bit about maybe your personal experiences and how you ended up in this realm of working with foster youth and starting Angel Reach?
Well, I did not come from a very functional family myself, and I ended up getting into trouble as a teenager and being in the juvenile system. So I was able to trace those decisions that I made back to the fact that I felt not a priority in my family, that my parents had substance issues that were their priority. And so I can relate to sort of that feeling that these youth have, that they're not the most important person in somebody's life. And so I felt like if I had that possibly I wouldn't have made some of the choices I did when I was a teenager. And so that was one reason. Another reason is that I was a foster parent for 16 years, and I worked with a lot of teenagers. And they were kind enough to share with me, their thought processes and how they felt and what had happened to them in their foster care, life. And so I was able to have a little insight. And to be honest with you, the turning point for me is that we had Angel Reach had an event. We have an annual event called Celebrate Me, where we invite 200 youth from the foster care system between the ages of 14 and 18 to kind of just have a big fun day at one of the churches that support us. And we have rock wall, we have spa for the girls, we have basketball, we have inspirational speakers, we have colleges there and the armed forces, just to kind of get them to start thinking about life after foster care and having a goal and just encouraging them. And that's why we call it Celebrate Me, because I just feel like these kids never get celebrated. And so they have T-shirts, and we have giveaways, and we have, great music, and it's fun. It's just a fun day. But what ended up happening the first time that we did this day was that 4 or 5 youth kept coming up to me and saying, "Miss, do you know where I can live after I get out?" And I was just like, wow, they don't have anywhere to live. They don't know where they're going to go, and having a graduation for some of the kids that graduate from high school, we started doing that. We started with a small dinner, and now it's turned into a huge event. But it's a very exciting day, but it's also super scary, because where do they go tomorrow?
Right.
So that's why we started the transitional living program.
And what maybe, advice or challenges could you offer to other people who are maybe wanting to offer this kind of transitional home service or something, which seems to be incredibly valuable and helpful for these kids? What advice would you offer to people who maybe want to start something similar? I think that the thing that was very helpful to me when we started our program is that we gathered a lot of community members, and because it's a very complicated issue, there's a lot of needs for the youth, and it's not really something that one organization can provide. So you need to really have a good network with other community services that you can rely on and refer to. I would also recommend having aged out foster youth helping you, plan your program, because we didn't have that in the beginning, but I got feedback right away, and we get feedback all the time now. We try to improve our program all the time by getting feedback from the youth. One of the programs that we just started is called Angel's Nest, and that's where we work with mothers who have aged out of the foster care system, who have children, who have had children removed by CPS, and we try to help them get them back, and then pregnant mothers, because 49% of girls that age out of foster care are pregnant by the time they're 19. Wow.
And 70% of those children are removed and put in the foster care system. So the foster care system is only getting bigger, and these girls have an average of 4 to 5 children in their lifetime. Wow. So, Angel's Nest was born out of us seeing that need, and we have girls that have children on that panel that is making that program, because we need to know what would make it easier for them to care for their children and keep them. Right.
Now, we covered a lot of ground here. One of the things you had mentioned is that, many of these kids can end up in they end up on the streets or end up with, a criminal record. They end up in human trafficking. And, I think that all of these different problems, as you kind of alluded to, do kind of come back to this lack of a compassionate, parent figure, or just somebody that has some faith and some, some love for these kids. If you could, give a vote of motivation to kids in the system who are maybe feeling helpless, feeling alone, feeling that no one cares for them, what would you want to say to them?
I would say, because we're a spiritual organization, because we're, faith-based, that God does love them, and God will, take care of them, and they just need to hang in there and connect with somebody. Try to find that one person that they can connect with, that they can relate to. The reason that our program, I think, works well is not necessarily of the mechanics. It doesn't matter. It's not so much the money. I mean, all of those things are very important, but it's because the people who work there want to be there. I mean, our organization has 50 volunteers that work every week, and those people are there because they want to be there. And the kids feel that. They've never had, a lot of the youth that come to our program have never been helped or taken care of by somebody who wasn't paid to do it. And it makes a big difference to them.
Right.
First, they're suspicious. It takes time for them to trust us. But it's powerful to have somebody love you just because they do.
Well, Sandra, thank you so much. And thank you for what you're doing with Angel Reach. We wish you guys the very best and want to do the best that we can to help you guys out. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for watching. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel so you can see all of our future videos, where I will actually be interviewing many of these foster care youth about their experiences. I hope that you enjoyed this video and you'll leave your comments below. Thank you so much for watching.